I'm Denny Marshall, Chair of the Board of Trustees for American Baptist College. It is an honor to welcome you back to your alma mater, American Baptist College, where you labored both physically, emotionally, and mentally to help change the world for the better. Thank you for all that you have done and continue to do. I also serve as the chair of Alpha Phi Alpha Scholarship Education Luncheon. It is also my honor to take this opportunity to extend a heartfelt greeting to one of our own brothers, Dr. Bernard Lafayette. He is a graduate of American Baptist College and a staunch civil rights activist, which started here at American Baptist College. He, along with fellow schoolmates John Lewis, C.T. Vivian, James Bevel, were leaders at this college. The Nashville community and ultimately the world, the synergy of their mission of justice helped to change the world and put the spotlight on American Baptist College, the Nashville community, and the world. Dr. Lafayette was a change agent in social justice merged with theology so that we all could be treated with respect and have an equitable opportunity for a pleasant and peaceful quality of life. So with that, Dr. Bernard Lafayette, I would just like to ask you a few questions on a personal level. So how did you get to American Baptist College from Florida?
Well, I lived in Tampa, Florida, and my affiliation was the very much oriented towards church activities. And I used to belong to St. John Baptist Church there in Tampa, Florida. And when I was a little boy, my grandmother used to tell me that I was going to be a preacher. I was very young. And she said she was absolutely sure because she saw the mark in my forehead.
Excellent.
So I used to look in the mirror a lot looking for this mark. And I did see a mark, but it was a chicken pox. So I was interested in journalism, and I actually ended up being the editor of our school newspaper in Tampa, Florida. And we won first place in the state of Florida.
Excellent.
So as a newspaper, the first prize winner in the state of Florida as editor at Milton Senior High School, I got a 4-year scholarship at Florida A&M.
Excellent.
And I was just excited about that. But my grandmother told me I was not going to go to Florida with a 4-year scholarship, that she had checked out different options. And she found this church that sponsored scholarships through the Southern Baptist Convention. And this was the white convention. And they had work scholarships here at American Baptist College.
Okay.
And she, who finished the 3rd grade, got me into college. Okay.
Excellent.
So that's how I got to American Baptist College. And I was telling someone earlier that I came 2 weeks before school started here in American Baptist College because I got the schedules mixed up with Florida A&M because I had really wanted to go there, but she told me I had to go here because I was going to be a minister. Yeah. So that's how I got to American Baptist College. And the first thing I did when I was here, they gave me a job. And the job was, we had a mule hooked up to, one of those grass cutters. And that's one of the first job I had on campus was cutting grass. Then they made me janitor to the 2nd floor, and I actually was used to working, because I can tell you the history of that too. But I used to volunteer to wash the dishes in the cafeteria.
Okay.
That's because I washed pots, and that meant that we had collard greens, and I used to love the pot liquor.
I hear you.
So I volunteered for that.
So let me ask you, while you were here as a student, were you and John Lewis roommates?
Yes, I had a room on the second floor, and it was a large room. And when John Lewis came, I told him that, well, he could share a room with me, because I had a large room for two people. And I thought it was a great idea because John Lewis was a year ahead of me,
Okay.
and he'd taken all the courses that I was going to take.
Okay.
So with all the jobs I had, I didn't have a lot of time to,
Right.
miss anything. So that was,
You're a roommate.
we ended up being roommates.
Okay.
And we were interested in civil rights and stuff like that, and I have a whole history of that
Yeah, well,
earlier.
that's
Yeah.
exactly where I was going to go. How did you get involved in the movement?
When I was 5 years old, living in Ybor City, which is a section of Tampa, Florida,
Mhm.
I was wakened every morning by the smell of the Cuban coffee, because Ybor City was, Cuban. In fact, Mr. Ybor, who the city was named after, was the one that used to produce cigars, Cuban cigars,
Gotcha.
because Mr. Ybor decided that he was going to make sells Cuban cigars, but he bought the tobacco from Cuba
Mhm.
and created factories in the U.S.
Okay.
to make the cigars.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Excellent.
So I was working with him, and I used to get up and I used to sell Cuban coffee, and I used to sell the coffee there at Las Novedades restaurant is where I got the Cuban coffee. And I used to wait to get the coffee, and I would order it from the merchants, and then I would go to Las Novedades before they even opened and used to get the coffee.
Okay.
So what happened is that I would sell the coffee to the merchants, 10 cents for the coffee, 10 cents for me, so I always had a lot of money, pocket change and that kind of thing. In fact, I took care of 3 lunches
Right.
for people. But my involvement in the movement comes when I pressed my thigh against the chair, the stool, where they sat in the restaurant. Black people couldn't sit in. They could order food and things that were standing up and take it out. So sometimes they would order for their employers. And so I pressed against that stool, and then I put my hip on top, and that was my first sit-in.
Gotcha.
Okay? So
Gotcha.
I had no problem, integrating
Right.
situations. So I had that experience. So when I got to the college here in Nashville, that's what John Lewis and I used to talk about, integration and stuff like that.
Right.
He's the one that persuaded me to go to Jim Lawson's workshops. And when he said workshop, I said, John, I don't have any time for no workshops. I got enough work to do already. So why should I try to go to a workshop?
Right.
He said, no, man, you just need to come in. So I just went, actually, my confession, I went to the workshop just to shut his mouth up, which was hard to do.
Understand.
Yeah.
Well, we're glad that you did.
But when I went there and learned that Jim Lawson was teaching these nonviolent workshops, that was it for me.
Yes.
I joined and
Excellent.
got involved in sit-ins. I want to say this, and you can go to the next question. But what happened with the here at American Baptist College, I was studying, the Bible and theology and that sort of thing, etc. But when Jim Lawson was teaching us, he was helping us to put those theological concepts and ideas and the concept of love into social action.
Right.
There was no contradiction.
Right.
So since I was a minister already, this was a form of ministry.
Mm-hmm. Well, speaking on American Baptist College and your experience here, what stands out to you about your experience here at American Baptist College on this Holy Hill?
I was extremely impressed with our president because he was completely silent. We did not get expelled because we got involved in the sit-ins and we got arrested and beaten and all that. Some of the other colleges, students got expelled and put out of school.
Right.
Our president never said one word. He didn't tell us he supported us, and he didn't tell us he didn't. He just was silent. That's what you call silent support. And some of the other presidents, they were state presidents, state colleges, universities, and they had some difficulties and that kind of thing, etc. And the other thing that was unique about this school is we had Reverend Kelly Miller Smith, who was pastor of church downtown, but also he was my New Testament professor, homiletics professor, rather.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
And C.T. Vivian was his assistant. Okay?
Okay.
So here we had on campus Reverend Kelly Miller Smith, who was head of the local chapter, you might say, or affiliate, of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. It's called the Nashville Christian Leadership Council.
Right.
That was with Martin Luther King. That represents civil rights.
Okay.
But we also had Professor Grimmett, and I think he taught Old Testament history or something like that. And he was head of the state NAACP. So American Baptist College was just ripe for helping to develop nonviolence in the ministry and social action. So we had no choice.
Right.
Those of us who were exposed. That's why you had so many of our students involved.
Absolutely. Well, I know this is a probably not intelligent question, but were your life ever threatened from a standpoint of seriously threatened as you were going through all of these different events?
Yes, more than once. I've been beaten and kidnapped and arrested, 30 times. So I did that. The most, besides being kidnapped in Colombia, Latin America, which was sort of unique, but it's not going to be something that a lot of people are going to experience. Right. But the most unique thing that happened where I was able to put my knowledge, theology, and all that into play was actually in Selma, Alabama. I decided that I was going to do a project in voter registration. I want to be a director of voter registration. And James Foreman told me, he was in Atlanta, Georgia, and he was head of the SNCC group. And by the way, I should say this because as I get older, people need to know, I helped recruit James Foreman because he was a professor at Roosevelt University in Chicago. So I helped recruit him to work for SNCC.
Thanks.
So when I told him that I wanted a project, he said, we don't have any more. So what do you mean you don't have any more projects on voter registration? I looked on the blackboard and there was an X through Selma in Dallas County. And I said, this is absolutely insane because we had Montgomery movement, okay, there in Alabama, Birmingham. Are you not going to have a voter registration movement? And he said, no. We've sent 2 teams down to Selma to get a movement started in voter registration. And both groups came back, groups of 5. And they said nothing could be done.
Mm.
And they came back with the same reason. They said that the white folks were too mean and the black folks were too scared.
Yeah.
They used to say scarred, but there was both scared and scarred.
Excellent.
Okay?
Well,
So he said, if you want to go take a look at it, you can do that. I said, no, I don't want to take a look at it. If it's impossible, then I want to do it. I was attacked in Selma, and I'll end with this because it goes back to your question, but I wanted to give you that background that nothing was expected to happen in Selma. The night that Medgar Evers was killed in Jackson, Mississippi, he worked for the NAACP, Medgar Evers. He was a state president, okay, or executive director. And I'd met him before on the Freedom Rides and stuff like that, so I knew him. That same night, I was coming from a mass meeting in Selma, Alabama, and I parked my car in front of my house. And it was a two-story apartment building, but I had the first floor on the bottom. And I was taking packages out of my back seat of my car. And I noticed there was another car across the street there in front of my place. And there were two white men. One was under the hood and the other under the steering wheel. And it looked like they were having car trouble or something, but that was typical because the rest of the community was white anyway. So I was used to seeing it. So then I heard these footsteps coming behind me as I was bending over in my back to my car. And I could hear the leaves from the trees because it was in June, and you had a lot of leaves on the ground. I could hear them cracking as he was coming. So I turned around, and sure enough, there was this huge guy. I mean, he looked, he had his T-shirt on. It was rolled up over his shoulders. He had a crew-cut haircut, and he was like, these football players, And I turned around and I looked up at him because I was really skinny in those days and short. And he said, "Buddy, how much would you charge me to give me a push?" Oh, he just wanted to push for his car. I was glad of that.
all right.
So I said, "I don't charge you anything, nothing." So I jumped behind my car and rode it. And Julian Bond had gotten me this car. And he gave other people new cars. And of course, they were, plastic and all that.
Right.
And he said, "Just be quiet." I said, "You're going to give me this old 48 Chevrolet." Okay? And this was in the 60s.
Wow.
Car almost 20 years old. I said, "Man," and he said, after he gave everybody else their car, he said, "Listen, man, you're going to be in the rural areas of Alabama. You're going to need a car that has metal doors and one that sits low. And you're going to need to be able to bank around unpaved curves and stuff. So you're going to need this kind of car."
Yes.
So I took him for his word, Julian Bond. So anyway, that's the kind of car I had.
Okay.
So I pulled up behind this guy, and this is coming to the end of the story. And he had been talking to the guy behind the wheel because he was under the hood initially. And I had high bumper guards. And he was stooping down, and he said, I said, "Well, do they fit?" The bumpers, because you don't want to get locked bumpers because you can't. And he said, "Well, you better come out and take a look." I jumped out my car because it was 11 o'clock at night. So I bent over, and I was sure that they worked because I had high bumper guards. It could push a truck. And he hit me. Boom! I went straight down the middle of the street. And I realized that it wasn't about no pushing a car.
Yep.
So I raised up, And nonviolent training that Jim Lawson had given me was a thing that equipped me with everything I needed. All right. So in my training here at the American Baptist College and, other things, I looked at him in the eye, and he looked down at me, and he hauled off and hit me again. Yeah, right there. You can still see the scars, where he hit me. I went straight down to the middle of the ground. I was a little skinny fellow. And then I stood back up again. Because in nonviolence, you are trained to resist, but not to fight back physically. You fight back. Because what you have to do is think about the purpose of the attack. It has two purposes when people attack other folk. One is, what is their expectation? That's the thing you should concentrate on. The person. Not the injury to yourself, but how you can change the perception of the person who's attacking you. And I looked at him, and he looked kind of, especially after the second hit, I stood up slowly. I didn't jump. I stood up slowly again because I had to act my way into thinking, because I didn't have time to think my way into acting.
Right.
So as I stood up, I looked at him again in his eyes, and he came down and hit me in the middle of my head, my temple, because that's supposed to be a soft spot in your head. But he didn't do any research, because my mother would have told him that and had no soft head. Okay.
Yes.
So I went straight down again, and then I struggled with my feet. I got up again, and I looked at him, and he was shaking. He was nervous, because he's supposed to knock me out the first go around. And he started backing up. And I realized he had a gun in his hand. That's what he was hitting me with. That gun, the butt of the gun. So the situation changed then. Wasn't no more hitting, because he was going to shoot me. So I yelled out to my neighbor, Red. He was a black fellow, but he's been to the army and all that kind of stuff, and he's black. But and he had seen the thing in the beginning, but now he heard my voice shouting, Red, Red. And he came across the banister with a rifle, and he was aiming at this guy. And I told him no. I raised both my hands and said, Red, don't shoot. And he was trying to get around me so he could get a beam on him, because Red used to train folks to shoot. So he was a good shot. And what happened is that he couldn't shoot this guy because I protected the guy. Okay? That was a high risk. Because the other thing is, nonviolence is practical. Because he tried to shoot the fella, okay, who had a gun on me. He might have missed and shot me.
Well,
So
no, go ahead.
what happened, the conclusion of that was the man dropped back and jumped in the car and took off. And so my protecting the fellow who was trying to kill me was the thing that saved me. So a week later, somebody from the FBI came from Mobile, told me there was a three-state conspiracy, tri-state conspiracy, he called it. And they planned to kill three of us the same night. Medgar Evers, myself, and Ben Elton Cox, who worked for the Corps down in Louisiana. He was on the original Freedom Ride out of, okay? that night, that same night. But the fella in Louisiana didn't come home. So they got Medgar Evers. And I didn't know Medgar Evers had been killed until the next morning. So the point I'm making is that the theology of understanding love and understanding how you put all of your forces together. Now, I could have been killed, yeah. But the question is, what did you do, okay, to resist?
Well, Dr. Lafayette, we're so glad you're still here with us. And that experience you had, I don't know if my generation and the younger generation today could have withstood that type of experience. So we definitely owe you a great deal of gratitude for everything that you personally went through and other civil rights leaders went through. One last thing, though, that I would like to ask you, with all of that experience, what words, lasting words, would you like to leave for the current students here at American Baptist College and also the fraternity brothers, Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity brothers? What would be your last word for encouragement or knowledge to us?
My last words would be this, very briefly, is that no matter what you're in, don't give in. The next thing is, the reason why you shouldn't give in is because change is possible.
Sure.
And if you put that as a goal and work on it, then you can also be able to achieve that goal. It's not impossible.
Excellent.
So therefore, you're that. And the main thing is to find a role for yourself. Decide what you're going to do in life. Don't just go and try to figure out what you're going to eat, okay? But have a role, a purpose, a goal that you're trying to accomplish, okay?
Excellent.
And if you're fortunate, you'd have a good partner like my wife, Kate, to assist you
Excellent.
in going forward. You're looking at Booker T. Washington's office boy daughter.
Is
Yes,
that right?
her father was Booker T. Washington's office boy.
Excellent.
Okay.
Excellent. Well, we truly appreciate you sharing words of wisdom with us and taking the time out to speak to us and give us such an intimate uh, knowledge into the world that you experienced. So we really do appreciate that. And we look forward to continuing to develop this relationship that we have where, you continue to support the school and continue to support our education scholarship. We're hoping to be able to endow a scholarship in your name here at American Baptist College, and that's what we're working toward right now. So thank you so much for the time that you've spent with us today, and I consider it a great pleasure to have sit here and have this conversation with you. So thank you.
It's a special privilege for me.